The hum of the Starship Odyssey was a familiar comfort to Elena. The galley was her domain, a small, dimly lit room filled with the steady clinks of pots and the aroma of fresh bread baking in the oven. For months, she had moved through this space with quiet purpose, preparing meals that kept the crew nourished and calm during long stretches in space. It was a simple, predictable life. That was about to change. Without warning, the entire ship shuddered violently. The hum was replaced by a harsh, grating noise that rattled the metal walls. Elena froze, her knife poised above a cutting board. The lights flickered, and a blaring alarm sliced through the air. The starship wasn't shaking because of mechanical failure. A voice crackled over the intercom, an urgent, strained warning. Pirates have breached the hull. All personnel, prepare for boarding. The words echoed in Elena's mind as fear settled like a weight in her chest. She had heard stories of pirate raids in the outer sectors, stories filled with violence and desperation. But those were distant tales. This was happening now here, and she was unarmed, untrained, and alone in the galley. Her hands trembled, but she forced herself to breathe deeply. There was no time to think about fear. The door to the galley slammed open with a loud crash. Heavy boots stomped into the room, and the first pirate stepped inside, his eyes wild and his grip tight on a plasma pistol. Elena's mind raced. She wasn't a soldier. Her job was to cook meals, not to fight. Yet, in that moment, survival demanded everything she had. She raised the kitchen knife, feeling its familiar weight in her hand. It was small, nothing compared to the weapons the pirates carried, but it was hers. The pirate lunged toward her. Elena sidestepped, barely dodging the blast of his pistol. Her heart hammered in her chest. She slashed, the blade cutting through the air and landing a solid blow on the pirate's arm. He yelped, staggering back. It wasn't much, but it was enough to throw him off balance. Other pirates flooded in, their faces grim and determined. They underestimated her, seeing only a cook in an apron. But Elena's eyes burned with a new fire, a fierce determination to protect her ship and her crew. She moved quickly, using the narrow space of the galley to her advantage. Pots, pans, and counters became shields and traps. She ducked under swinging blades, twisted away from a punch, and slashed at anyone who came too close. Each strike was fueled by adrenaline and sheer willpower. The noise outside the galley was chaos, shouts, gunfire, the sharp clang of metal on metal. Yet inside, Elena felt a strange clarity. Her fear was still there, but it was pushed aside by a primal urge to survive. This was no longer just a kitchen. It was a battlefield, and she was a reluctant warrior. One pirate fell to the floor, clutching a bleeding arm. Another hesitated, eyes wide with disbelief at the unexpected resistance. Elena's breath came in sharp bursts, but she kept fighting. Every second she survived was a chance to protect the others. Suddenly, the ship jolted again, knocking Elena off her feet. She hit the cold metal floor hard, but rolled to her side, clutching her knife tightly. The sound of approaching footsteps grew louder. More pirates were coming. She scrambled to her feet, scanning the room for anything she could use. Her eyes landed on a heavy metal ladle resting on the counter. It wasn't a weapon, but it was better than nothing. She grabbed it and waited, heart pounding, as the door began to creak open once more. The next pirate stepped inside, confident and cruel. Elena swung the ladle with all her strength. The blow connected with a sickening crack, and the pirate stumbled back, stunned. Elena didn't hesitate. She lunged forward, slashing with the knife. The pirate went down, and for a brief moment, silence filled the room. She stood among the fallen invaders, breathing hard, her hands shaking. The galley was a mess, overturned pots, spilled food, and the sharp scent of sweat and blood. But Elena was alive. The alarms continued to blare, and beyond the galley walls, the battle raged on. Elena knew this was only the beginning. She was no longer just the cook on the Odyssey. She was a survivor, And if the pirates wanted to take the ship, they would have to get through her first. The metallic clang of the galley door echoed again, louder this time. Elena's heart jumped as she turned to face the next wave of pirates. She was alone, cornered in a space meant for cooking, not fighting. Every muscle in her body screamed to run, but she knew there was no escape. The narrow room left her no choice but to stand her ground. Her hands, slick with sweat, gripped the kitchen knife tighter. She couldn't afford to show fear. Not now. The first pirate to enter was a brute with a scar slicing across his cheek and a cold glint in his eye. He sneered, clearly amused by the sight of a lone cook brandishing a kitchen knife. "You really think you can stop us with that?" he mocked, raising his plasma rifle. Elena didn't answer. Instead, she took a deep breath, her eyes never leaving his. The room was cramped, full of sharp corners and heavy utensils. She moved closer, weaving between overturned pots and scattered food containers. The pirate fired, the blast scorching a metal shelf inches from her face. She ducked, rolling forward and slashing at his leg. The blade caught his armor, not deep, but enough to surprise him. The scarred pirate growled and lunged. Elena stepped back quickly, using a steel counter as a shield. Her mind raced. She needed a plan, but there was no time. The other pirates began pouring in, surrounding her like wolves circling prey. She was outnumbered, outgunned, and outmatched. Yet, something inside her refused to give up. One pirate charged with a heavy baton. Elena sidestepped, grabbed a frying pan from the counter, and swung it with all her might. The impact sent him staggering back, clutching his head. The others hesitated. They hadn't expected resistance, especially not from a cook. The sound of footsteps and shouting filled the corridor outside. The crew was trying to regroup, but they were scattered and disorganized. Elena's mind flashed to the captain, the engineers, the other cooks, everyone depending on her now. She couldn't fail. With renewed determination, she darted toward a rack of knives hanging on the wall. She grabbed a larger chef's knife, its blade gleaming under the flickering lights. The pirates closed in, but Elena was faster. She moved like a shadow, striking with precision, each blow calculated and sharp. One by one, the pirates began to fall. Blood pooled on the floor, and the air grew thick with smoke and tension. Elena's breathing was heavy, but her focus sharpened. Every moment counted. Every pirate she took down was a chance to buy her crew time. Suddenly, the ship rocked violently. The lights flickered again, and a harsh voice blared through the intercom. "All hands, brace for impact." Elena's stomach dropped. The Odyssey was under attack from multiple fronts. The pirates wanted to take the ship by force, and she was standing in their way. She spotted a doorway leading to the engine room. If the pirates gained control of the engines, the ship would be doomed. Elena sprinted toward the door, knives in hand, heart pounding in her ears. Behind her, shouts and curses erupted. The fight was far from over. Elena burst into the narrow corridor, the smell of burning wires and hot metal thick in the air. Sparks flew from damaged panels, and the hum of the engines faltered. The pirates had already reached the engine room crew, threatening their lives. She didn't hesitate. Raising her knife, she lunged at the nearest pirate. The man stumbled, surprised by her ferocity. The others turned, but Elena was relentless. She fought with everything she had, driven by desperation and the will to survive. The pirates began to retreat, slowly pushed back by the unexpected resistance. Elena called out to the engineers, urging them to stabilize the engines. They nodded, wiping sweat and grime from their faces, and got to work. The alarms continued to scream, red lights flashing wildly throughout the ship. Elena's body ached, but she didn't stop. She had become something she never imagined, a protector, a fighter. The cook, who had once simply prepared meals, was now the line between survival and death for the entire crew. The last pirate in the corridor fell, and silence began to settle. Elena's breath came in ragged gasps as she looked around at the battered ship and exhausted faces of her fellow crew members. They had survived for now, but the battle was far from over. Elena knew the pirates would come back, stronger and more organized. She looked down at the knife in her hand, a symbol of how much had changed. She was no longer just a cook. She was a survivor. And if the pirates thought she would go down without a fight, they were dead wrong. The silence that followed the retreat of the pirates was thick, almost suffocating. Elena stood alone in the narrow corridor, chest heaving, eyes scanning every shadow. The adrenaline that had fueled her moments before was starting to wane, replaced by a heavy exhaustion that seeped into her bones. Yet there was no time to rest. The ship was still under siege, and every second counted. Her hands shook as she gripped the knife, the weight of what had just happened settling in. She wasn't a trained soldier. She was a cook, a woman who had spent her days chopping vegetables and stirring pots. But now, the cold reality was clear. Survival meant something else entirely. It meant fighting, and if necessary, killing. The distant sounds of footsteps echoed down the hallway. Elena pressed herself against the wall, heart pounding in her ears. Through the flickering lights, she caught sight of two figures approaching, their movements cautious but deliberate. She tightened her grip, ready for another fight. As the figures drew closer, relief washed over her. It was Lieutenant Harris and Corporal Daniels, two members of the security team who had managed to regroup. Their faces were grim, eyes sharp with urgency. "We've secured the lower decks," Harris said, voice low but steady. "Pirates are pushing toward the bridge. We need to hold them there." Elena nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I'm with you." Together, they moved through the ship's narrow corridors, the air thick with smoke and the acrid smell of burnt circuitry. Sparks flickered from damaged panels, casting eerie shadows on the metal walls. Every corner held danger. Every step could be the last. As they reached the stairwell leading up to the bridge, a sudden explosion rocked the ship. The floor beneath them trembled violently. Harris stumbled, catching himself against the railing. Elena's heart jumped. "They're trying to blow us out," Daniels said grimly. "We have to move faster." They climbed quickly, each step echoing in the confined space. At the top of the stairs, the door to the bridge was locked down, secured against intrusion. Harris accessed the control panel, fingers flying over the keys. The lock clicked open. Inside, the bridge was chaos. Screens flickered with static, some blacked out entirely. The captain stood at the center, barking orders as crew members scrambled to maintain control. Elena's eyes met his for a brief moment. There was relief there, but also worry. "We're holding for now," the captain said. "But we won't last long if they break through." Elena swallowed her fear and stepped forward. "I can help," she said. The room fell silent for a moment before Harris nodded. "We need every hand we can get." Elena took a deep breath and moved to the weapons console. She was unfamiliar with the controls, but desperation pushed her to learn fast. With Harris guiding her, she quickly got the hang of operating the defensive turrets. Each blast that erupted from the ship's automated guns took down another pirate raider. The bridge shook as another wave of attackers slammed against the bulkhead doors. Elena's hands were steady, but her mind raced. She remembered the faces of the pirates in the galley, the surprise in their eyes when she fought back. They hadn't expected her. Neither had she. Suddenly, the communications officer shouted, "Pirates have breached the outer hull. They're coming through the airlocks." Panic rippled through the crew. Elena's breath caught. There was nowhere left to run. The captain barked out a command, and the blast doors began to seal. But it was too late for some. Figures appeared in the hallway outside the bridge, armored pirates with weapons raised. Elena felt a cold wash of fear, but it was tempered by determination. She stepped forward, clutching a rifle that had been handed to her moments before. It was heavy, unfamiliar, but it was a weapon. her chance to fight back. The doors burst open. The pirates charged. The firefight was brutal and close. Elena fired, her shots finding their marks. She ducked behind consoles, dodging return fire. Her training was non-existent, but her will was unbreakable. Every breath, every heartbeat was focused on survival. One pirate lunged toward her, blade flashing. Elena twisted, bringing the rifle, but down hard on his helmeted head. He crumpled to the floor. Her arms burned, but she kept moving. Around her, the crew fought with everything they had. It wasn't just about the ship anymore. It was about protecting each other, about not giving in. Minutes stretched like hours. The sounds of battle echoed through the ship. And then, slowly, the tide began to turn. The pirates faltered. The crew pushed them back, sealing the bridge once more. Elena sank against the wall, breathing hard, sweat and grime mixing on her face. She looked down at her hands, still trembling. She was far from the cook she had been hours ago. This was a different battle, a fight for survival, for hope. And though she was exhausted, Elena knew one thing with clarity. She would fight for as long as it took. Because this ship, this crew, was her home. And she would not let them fall. The bridge was quiet now, but the silence was fragile, like the calm before another storm. Elena's muscles ached, and her breath came in short bursts, but she forced herself to stand tall. The weight of the rifle in her hands was unfamiliar, but it grounded her. She wasn't just the ship's cook anymore. She was a defender, maybe even the last line of defense. Outside, the red warning lights flashed relentlessly, casting a grim glow across the faces of the crew. The ship groaned as it fought against the damage. Elena glanced at the captain, whose eyes were fixed on the cracked viewport, scanning the darkness for any sign of the pirates' return. The captain's voice broke the tense quiet. "We need to secure the armory. If the pirates get their hands on those weapons, we're finished." Harris stepped forward. "The armory's 2 decks down, starboard side. It's risky, but if we don't move fast, it'll be too late." Elena nodded. "I'll go." The decision surprised even her. She wasn't trained for this kind of mission. But in this moment, there was no room for hesitation. She had to act. The corridor to the armory was narrow and dimly lit, a maze of metal and shadows. Elena moved quickly but cautiously. Every creak, every distant clang made her jump. Her senses sharpened with every step. The ship was no longer just a vessel. It was a battleground. Halfway there, a sharp noise echoed down the hallway. Elena froze. From the shadows, a pirate lunged at her, weapon raised. She barely had time to react, blocking the blow with her rifles, but the impact jarred her. But she twisted and brought the heavy weapon down on his shoulder. He grunted, staggering back. Elena didn't wait. She pushed forward, heart pounding. Her mind flashed back to the galley, the knife, the frying pan. Those memories fueled her resolve. She wasn't helpless. The armory door was locked tight. Elena fumbled with the keypad, her fingers trembling. Finally, with a soft beep, it clicked open. Inside, the room was a cold vault of weapons, rifles, pistols, and ammunition neatly arranged. For the first time, Elena felt a flicker of hope. If she could arm the crew, they might stand a chance. She grabbed 2 rifles and checked the magazines. Her hands steadied as she loaded the weapons, each click echoing in the silence. She stuffed extra ammo into a pouch at her side. Suddenly, the door hissed open behind her. A shadow moved into the dim light. A pirate. Elena spun, rifle raised. The pirate raised his hands mockingly. "Going somewhere, cook?" Her grip tightened on the rifle. "Stay back." He laughed, stepping closer. Elena's breath caught. She knew she was outmatched. But this time, she had weapons. She had hope. The pirate lunged. Elena fired. The shot rang out sharp and true. The pirate fell, eyes wide in shock. Elena's heart pounded so loudly she thought he might hear it. She didn't waste a second. She ran out of the armory, rifles in hand. The corridor outside was empty, but she knew it wouldn't stay that way for long. On her way back, she encountered a group of crew members, huddled and frightened. Their eyes widened when they saw the weapons. "Weapons," she said simply, handing them out. "We fight. Together." Hope sparked in their eyes. Elena became their leader, an unlikely commander born from desperation. She showed them how to load, how to hold their ground. The fear was still there, but beneath it was a growing strength. Back on the bridge, the captain looked at her with a mix of pride and disbelief. "You're changing this fight, Elena." She nodded. "We're not just cooks and engineers anymore. We're survivors." The ship shuddered again as distant explosions rocked the hull. The pirates weren't finished. Neither was Elena. With rifles in hand and a heart steeled by fire, she prepared for the next wave. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about standing up, fighting back, and proving that even the most unlikely warriors could become the deadliest enemies. The night on the Odyssey had shifted into something unrecognizable. Elena moved through the corridors with a new sense of purpose, the heavy rifle cradled in her arms. She could hear the murmurs of the crew, whispers of hope mingled with fear. But the hope was real, because now they were armed. Now they could fight. The pirates weren't just ruthless attackers. They were cunning and relentless. Elena knew this better than anyone. Her mind replayed the first moments of the raid, the chaos in the galley, and how quickly everything had turned upside down. But she also remembered something else, the look of surprise on the pirates' faces when a cook fought back. That moment of hesitation was all the advantage she needed. Her footsteps echoed down the dimly lit hall as she headed toward the communications room. The captain had ordered her there to help restore contact with nearby friendly ships. If they could send a distress signal, reinforcements might come. But the path was dangerous. Pirates had already seized several key areas. She rounded a corner and froze. A pirate patrol blocked her way, weapons at the ready. Elena's heart hammered, but she didn't falter. The crew she had armed and trained were counting on her. She raised her rifle and moved swiftly, firing 2 quick shots. The pirates crumpled silently. Elena barely had time to catch her breath before pressing forward. The communications room door was sealed, but Harris was already at the panel, fingers flying over the controls. "I'm trying to override the system," he said without looking up. "It's heavily damaged." Elena scanned the room. Broken screens and exposed wires created a hazardous maze. Sparks flickered from the console as Harris worked, sweat beading on his forehead. Time was slipping away. Suddenly, the ship shuddered violently. The entire room trembled, as if the Odyssey was fighting to hold itself together. Elena grabbed a nearby chair to steady herself. "We don't have much time," Harris said urgently. "Signal's almost ready, but the pirates are closing in." Elena glanced toward the door and saw shadows moving in the corridor. They weren't alone. The door blasted open. Pirates poured in, weapons blazing. Elena and Harris ducked behind the console, returning fire. The firefight was intense and brutal. Bullets shattered glass, and the air filled with smoke and the smell of burning circuitry. Elena fired steadily, every shot precise. She had never imagined herself in this position. Not a soldier, just a cook thrown into a war zone. But every fiber of her being screamed to survive, to protect. The pirates faltered under their resistance. Harris yelled, signal sent. Relief surged through Elena, but it was short-lived. The pirates regrouped, pressing their attack harder. The door began to buckle under heavy blows. "We have to hold them off," Elena shouted. "If the pirates take this room, the whole ship's lost." Her voice steadied the crew members around her. They fought with renewed courage, rallying behind the cook who had become their fiercest protector. With a final surge of strength, the pirates were pushed back. The door slammed shut, seals hissing as it locked. Elena leaned against the console, breath ragged but victorious. "Signal's out," Harris confirmed. Help's on the way." A flicker of hope ignited in the room. Elena looked around at the exhausted faces. Crewmates who had once seen her only as a cook, now fighters standing side by side. For a moment, the war outside felt distant, as if the Odyssey had found a fragile sanctuary. But Elena knew better. The pirates would not give up. They would return stronger and more ruthless. And the battle was far from over. Yet something inside her had changed forever. She was no longer just a cook in a galley. She was a symbol of resilience, of courage in the face of overwhelming odds. Elena gripped her rifle tightly. The fight would continue. The Odyssey might be battered, but its heart was unbroken. And so was she. The Odyssey trembled as the weight of battle pressed harder against its hull. Elena's breath came in shallow bursts, her muscles aching from hours of fighting. But she forced herself to move faster. Every second mattered now. The pirates weren't giving up. They were regrouping, adapting, and launching new attacks with relentless fury. She checked her rifle again, fingers steady despite exhaustion. Around her, crew members scrambled to patch breaches and set up defenses. Most had never seen combat before, yet here they were, fighting side by side with grim determination. Elena's mind raced back to the first moments of a raid, the chaos in the galley, the fear turning to fierce resolve. She wasn't the same woman anymore. That cook had vanished beneath layers of grit and steel. A sudden alarm blared through the ship. The intercom crackled to life. Boarding party detected near the cargo hold. All available personnel report immediately. Elena didn't hesitate. She sprinted down the twisting corridors, the metallic clang of boots echoing behind her. As she neared the cargo hold, she saw the damage. The heavy blast doors were warped, smoke billowed out, and the metallic scent of burning circuitry filled the air. Pirates poured through the breach, their weapons raised and eyes wild with aggression. Elena raised her rifle, firing with deadly accuracy. Each shot dropped an enemy, but there were too many. The crew fought valiantly, but the pirates pushed forward relentlessly. Elena saw one of her crewmates fall, and rage fueled her next moves. She charged, knocking a pirate aside with the butt of her rifle and grabbing a fallen enemy's weapon. Her hands moved faster than thought, unloading clip after clip. The tide turned slowly. Crew members inspired by her ferocity rallied and pushed back the invaders. But the pirates were not finished. A heavy explosion rocked the cargo bay, sending Elena sprawling. Dazed, she scrambled to her feet, her ears ringing. The explosion had destroyed part of the ship's power conduit, plunging the corridor into near darkness. Emergency lights flickered on, casting long shadows. Elena signaled to her crew, "Fall back to the control room. We hold the line there." They retreated, firing as they went, the sound of pursuit close behind. When they reached the control room, Elena helped barricade the door, bolting heavy metal panels in place. Inside, the crew huddled, breaths heavy, eyes wide with adrenaline and fear. Elena wiped sweat from her brow and looked around. "We can't keep running," she said. "We have to take the fight to them." Her words sparked a fire in the crew. They nodded, gripping their weapons tighter. Elena scanned the room, spotting the emergency power console. If they could restore the ship's main defenses, they might turn the tide. She moved quickly, pulling up panels and rerouting power with the help of the engineers. The pirates pounded on the door, trying to break through. "Almost there," one engineer said, sweat dripping down his face. The door shook violently as the pirates intensified their assault. With a final flick of a switch, the ship's defense turrets roared to life, firing precise energy blasts into the corridors. Outside, the pirates fell back, caught off guard by the sudden automated assault. Elena breathed out a shaky sigh of relief. "We got a chance," she said, voice steady despite the pounding in her chest. But the battle was far from over. She gathered her crew. "We hold this position. We wait for reinforcements." The crew nodded, fortified by the promise of help and the fierce will that had brought them this far. Elena looked out the viewport, stars twinkling coldly in the vastness of space. They were alone, battered, but not defeated. And as long as she stood with them, the Odyssey would fight to survive. The hours that followed were a relentless blur of noise and motion. Elena moved through the corridors of the Odyssey like a shadow, every sense sharpened by the constant threat pressing down on them. The ship was a cage of metal and fire, and somewhere within it, the pirates still prowled, looking for any weakness to exploit. Her body ached, but she pushed the pain aside. She couldn't afford to slow down, not now. Every moment counted. Every breath could be the difference between survival and death. The crew gathered in small groups, regrouping where they could, catching brief moments of rest before the next assault. Elena found herself in the medical bay, helping tend to the wounded. Her hands, once skilled at chopping vegetables, now pressed bandages, tightened tourniquets, and whispered calm to terrified faces. A young technician, barely more than a boy, looked up at her with wide eyes. "Are we really going to make it?" Elena smiled, though the weight of uncertainty pressed heavily on her heart. "We have to," she said. "We don't have a choice." She stepped outside, the red emergency lights casting eerie shadows. The ship groaned under the strain of battle damage, and the silence was shattered by distant explosions and the echo of footsteps. Suddenly, the intercom crackled to life. It was the captain's voice, low and steady. Enemy forces regrouping in the lower decks. "We must hold the bridge at all costs." Elena took a deep breath. The bridge was their heart. If it fell, everything would fall with it. She moved quickly, gathering the remaining crew and weapons. The corridor was littered with debris, flickering lights barely illuminating the way. Each step was a risk, but they pressed forward, determination etched on every face. At the base of the stairs leading to the bridge, they encountered resistance. Pirates had set up a makeshift barricade, weapons trained on the narrow passage. Elena raised her rifle, steadying her aim. "We push through," she said, "for the ship." The firefight was brutal. The confined space left no room for error. Shots rang out, and the air filled with the sharp scent of gunpowder. Elena fired, each pull of a trigger a calculated effort to protect her team. One pirate lunged at her from the side. Elena spun, bringing the rifle but down hard. The man crumpled, but there was no time to hesitate. More enemies pressed forward. The crew fought as one, pushing the pirates back step by step. Elena's voice rose above the chaos, directing and encouraging. The unlikely soldiers followed her lead, their fear giving way to resolve. At last, the barricade gave way. They surged upward to the bridge. The sight that greeted them was grim. The captain and a handful of crew were pinned down, outnumbered but unyielding. The room was a whirlwind of smoke, shattered glass, and flickering consoles. Elena didn't hesitate. She charged in, rifle blazing, her shots finding targets with surprising precision. The pirates faltered, then retreated, their assault broken. Breathing heavily, Elena moved to the captain's side. "We held them," she said, voice steady despite the pounding in her chest. He nodded, eyes filled with gratitude. "Thanks to you." The ship was battered, and the fight far from over. But in that moment, something had shifted. Elena wasn't just a cook who had picked up a knife in desperation. She was a leader, a symbol of hope and defiance. The crew rallied around her, renewed energy flowing through their veins. They had faced the darkness and refused to break. Outside, the stars stretched endlessly, a silent witness to the battle raging within. Elena looked out the viewport, the weight of what lay ahead settling on her shoulders. The pirates would come again, and when they did, she would be ready. The Odyssey hung in the dark void of space, battered but unbroken. Elena stood at the viewport, the cold stars stretching infinitely beyond the glass. The silence felt heavier now, no blaring alarms, no gunfire, only the quiet hum of a ship still clinging to life. But Elena knew this peace was fragile. The pirates hadn't given up. They never would. Her fingers tightened around the rifle resting against her side. The weight felt natural now, a part of her, like the apron she'd worn in the galley before the nightmare began. She'd come so far from that woman, the cook who simply kept the crew fed, to this, a warrior hardened by fire and loss. The captain approached quietly. "We've received confirmation. Help is on its way." Relief surged through the crew, but Elena remained cautious. "How long?" she asked. "Hours, maybe less," he replied. "We have to hold out until then." Elena nodded. "Then we prepare. We don't get to rest yet." The crew gathered, tired but resolute. Elena moved among them, distributing ammo and sharing words of encouragement. They looked to her now, not just as a cook or even a soldier, but as a beacon. She felt the weight of their hope settle on her shoulders, heavy but not unbearable. As she walked through the corridors, Elena caught glimpses of what the pirates' assault had done. Scorched walls, broken panels, injured crewmates. The ship was scarred, just like they were. But it was still theirs. Suddenly, the ship jolted violently. The pirates had launched a desperate final assault. "Battle stations," the captain ordered. Elena sprinted toward the armory to retrieve more weapons. She passed crew members loading cannons, setting up barricades, readying themselves for what might be the last stand. The corridor ahead erupted in flames as an explosion ripped through the bulkhead. Debris rained down, and Elena was thrown to the floor. Pain flared through her leg, but she pushed herself up. She crawled toward the armory, grit burning in her lungs. The pirates were closing in, their shouts echoing like ghosts of death. Inside the armory, she grabbed a heavier weapon, a plasma rifle, sleek and deadly. The unfamiliar weight was daunting, but desperation sharpened her instincts. This was no longer about survival. It was about fighting back, fighting to reclaim what was theirs. Elena emerged to find the hallway swarming with pirates. They were reckless now, driven by fury and desperation. She fired with precision, each shot cutting down an enemy. The crew rallied behind her, their morale reignited by her courage. The battle became a blur of motion, blasts of energy, shouted orders, the clash of bodies. Time seemed to stretch and collapse all at once. In the midst of chaos, Elena caught sight of a young pirate commander barking orders. Their eyes locked. Two forces of will in a universe of uncertainty. Without hesitation, Elena charged. The fight was brutal. They exchanged blows, each strike a clash of survival and defiance. Finally, Elena's strength prevailed. The commander fell, and with him, the pirates' will broke. The Odyssey shuddered as the remaining attackers retreated, beaten and broken. Breathing hard, Elena stood among her crew. The ship was battered, the cost steep, but victory was theirs, for now. The intercom crackled. "Reinforcements have arrived. Help is here." Tears blurred Elena's vision, not a sorrow, but relief. They had survived. Against all odds. As the crew began to rebuild, Elena allowed herself a moment to remember who she was, a cook, a fighter, a survivor. And though the war had changed her forever, she knew one thing with certainty. She would never stop fighting for her ship, her crew, and the life they had all risked to protect.